Welcome to episode 29 of the Everyday Sens podcast. I'm Jack Richardson, joined by Brennan Parks. Brennan, another tornado in Ottawa last night, actually. So, hopefully everyone who is listening is safe. Everyone's homes are intact and everything. It sucks to see that and stuff, but just figured I'd mention what's going on in Ottawa because, once again, it's the dog days of summer. Tarasenko was signed. There's not much else going on until we get a Shane Pinto deal, until some cap is moved out. We don't have much to talk about that's breaking about the Ottawa Senators, but as we do and as we've done for 29 episodes, we're going to go for an hour. We're going to find something. We're going to figure out a way. So, Brendan, how you doing on this Friday, August 4th?
Doing well, yeah. I was just going to say it is the dog days of summer now officially. I think August 4th, like you said, there's just not much happening. I mean, I don't even expect anything to happen. The Pinto contract is about the only other piece of news I think we're going to see for the rest of this summer until training camp pretty much, and Sokolov too. But yeah, otherwise, like we've got some segments, of course. We are content creators, as they say. So we're going to just kind of make some content out of thin air and then hopefully get some good discussion going. So, of course, regardless of what time it is in the year, there's always stuff to talk about. We've got some pretty good discussions. I think this is one of the more exciting kind of topics I'm excited to talk about today. So it should be good. And yeah, we can dive right into to our first piece here.
Yeah, so we're gonna start here. I'll preface it just for everyone watching. Obviously, if you clicked it, you see the thumbnail, you see our title, so you know what we're going to talk about. But we're gonna start by talking about Ottawa's goaltending tandem. Obviously, a lot was spent money wise and time wise for us just talking about Jonas Korpisalo being the new Ottawa Senators goalie, and then the health of Anton Forsberg. So we're gonna dive into that. And then later, we're going to compare the Ottawa Senators to the Buffalo Sabres. And this isn't just because we want to compare the two teams. We're going to try and do that with every team in the Atlantic, at least probably some other ones in the Metro that, the teams that Ottawa is going to be fighting for a playoff spot down the line. So that's what we're going to dedicate a lot of our time in August to, is just comparing the rosters. Most rosters are set in stone right now. We're not going to, I'm just taking a guess here. We're not going to be using Matthew Joseph per se, because I think he's probably the guy on the way out. But yeah, like just stuff like that, we'll be comparing those rosters. But right now, and it will probably bleed into that one a little bit, but let's talk about the goaltending tandem, because this was a team last year that they had their flaws. They had their flaws at 5-on-5. They needed to score more at 5-on-5. They didn't defend well enough, I think, in high danger scoring chances at 5-on-5, is what the analytics will say. But also, expected goals for and expected goals against. The positive regression should have made this a playoff team based on what they did analytically, as a possession team. So goaltending was a bit of a fault last season, and it wasn't just the play, it was just the consistency. I believe the Sens used 7 different goaltenders last season. And yeah, so we're going to talk about how confident we are in their goaltending going into next year, because it's going to be a main focus. It's one of the biggest ifs going into next year. So let's get started here. I'm going to start it right with you. And just answer the question here. How confident are you in Ottawa's goaltenders? I know you put out a poll, not a poll, sorry, but a question just on Twitter and Instagram, just asking how confident people were, and it got a lot of traction, and we have a lot of mixed reviews on that one. So, Brendan, how confident are you in Ottawa's goaltenders?
Yeah, well, on my post there, I don't think I saw anybody say above 8. I think the majority, I didn't count. There was like a ridiculous amount of replies. I was not expecting that, but I think the average is probably 7, like on a scale of 1 to 10. That's what people said, maybe even 6. It was actually kind of surprisingly low. I don't think people are very sold on Korpisalo so far. I'm obviously pretty high on him. I think he's got like one thing about him that I'm excited about. I just looked at it, is Columbus last year. They produced a record of 25, 48, and 9, which is just god awful. And he actually had a record of 11, 11, and 3 there, which is like on that team, that's pretty impressive considering, that's a 500 record basically. So I'm high on Korpisalo, so I'm fairly confident. I think I would probably put it on a scale of 1 to 10 as like a 7 as well right now, but that's more so because of health. I'm a little nervous about the health. Korpisalo's had some injuries. Forsberg's obviously coming back of 2 torn MCLs. Like, you don't know what's going to happen there. We could kind of factor in if somebody gets hurt, like, are you confident in Sogard? Sort of, like, it's just such a question mark, right? So for me, it's probably about a 7 on a scale of 1 to 10, because I am high on Korpisalo. I don't really buy into the whole, he's not going to be even an average starter. I've kind of said, like, if he can even be an average level starter, which is worse than he was last year, like, I think that's good enough to push Ottawa to the playoffs based on the roster they have. I think they're going to help him out with defensively too. But they really just need him to be average and consistent. They just need their goalies to be consistently average. They don't need them to carry or win games. They just need them to be consistently average. So I am confident that they will be that, because that's not an overly high bar. But at the same time, like I said, it's all health permitting, and I'm quite nervous about the injuries. So that's my kind of take. But yeah, what are you feeling on a scale of 1 to 10?
I don't want to say the exact same number, so I'll give it an 8, because it's mainly for me it's Corpusalo, because yeah, I'm concerned about Forsberg and just the injury history, and maybe not even history, just what he's coming off of last year, right? It's not ideal to have one MCL injury, but having two is even worse at the same time. So maybe it's good for recovery. I mean, I think a lot of people who get leg injuries will tell you that, because obviously they keep their strength up, but let's say you injure your right knee, your left leg stays strong and even gets stronger. And then part of the battle is when you get healthy again is getting the strength and balance back. So look, maybe having both injured at the same time could help him in that regard. Like he'll be on the same recovery timeline for both legs. Obviously, it's been a long time. There's videos of him on the ice at the Sensplex, so I think he's still in Ottawa, stayed in Ottawa this summer. So not that matters, but it's good that he's already on the ice, obviously. Uh, and look, with Corpusalo, to me, it's just he had one great year last year, and I think you can categorize it as a great year given where he was, and it wasn't just a product of him getting a lot of shots faced in Columbus, because when he went to LA, a better defensive team, one of the best defensive teams in the league, his numbers got even better, which is good, right? He wasn't an anchor for them. Now, in the playoffs, Corpusalo had maybe a few good games, but the Edmonton Oilers were something else. So it's hard to be like, oh yeah, you got to be a better goalie when McDavid and Draisaitl are just lighting your team up. So I don't really look at the playoff performance as a concern. The thing I guess with him is just injury history, right? Because last year it wasn't even a full year. He started 40 games, which is good. That's all they need out of him. That's all they should be expecting, really, is to play half a year. Because that's today's NHL. If you're a goalie starting, I think it's maybe 3 goalies started more than 60 games last year. I might be pulling that out of nowhere, but it's a low number. Like I know Connor Hellebuck did. I'm pretty sure UC Saros and I think Shesterkin. Like it's a small list, and they're elite goalies. So I think with Corpusalo, expecting 35 to 40 starts out of him is not crazy, because then you get another 35 to 40 from Forsberg. Throw in a few for your AHL backup whenever, if someone does go down, because I'm not expecting both of them to be exactly healthy for all 82 games. It's just not going to happen. It's just avoiding the long stretches of having to ride one guy. So I'd say I'm confident in Ottawa's goaltenders. I'm an 8 out of 10 on the scale. I think Corpusalo, what I saw from him last year makes me confident. And it's really the flip side of the coin, right? Because I don't want to, I mean, hindsight's 2020, but I've said it before, but last year when they made the trade for Cam Talbot, I was scratching my head a little bit, because I didn't think that they needed to. I really didn't. I thought that riding Forsberg and Gustafsson would have been okay. Not that I was super high on Philip Gustafsson, and that, trading him, I don't think was, obviously it has not turned out well, but I don't want to say that it was a bad idea to trade him, if that makes sense, right? Like they knew what they had in him, kind of a bad season or whatever. But anyway, my point was, like, I thought that if they were going to swing for a goaltender, Cam Talbot was kind of a lateral move, in that he wasn't going to move the needle all that much. Anyway, I don't know. Hindsight's very 2020, but I feel more confident in a Corpusalo move than trading for Talbot. I should put it that way. Like I'm more confident. And I'll ask you, are you more confident this year than you were last summer in the goaltending?
100%. Yeah. I mean, I've actually been so ridiculously harsh about Cam Talbot. I don't even know why. Something about Cam Talbot just kind of bugs me. I guess just on the ice, but there was some comments too that kind of put me in the wrong direction as well. But Talbot, like I've seen people honestly say, in other fan bases especially, and we talked about the toxicity of other fan bases seeping into my brain cells last episode. But we've, like, a lot of them have said that Corpusalo's not an upgrade on Cam Talbot, and that we just swapped goalies with LA. And it blows my mind. I can't. So Corpusalo, based on his numbers, pretty much ranked as like the 12th best goaltender in the league last year, and that's obviously kind of situational and it's just the numbers, but that's pretty much where he ranked, was a top 12 netminder. Talbot was probably like bottom 10. Like it's such a wide gap. And I know people don't like to just look at one season, and that's fair, right? Because if we're just looking at last season, that's not really fair. You have to look at the last few seasons at least, where Corpusalo has struggled a bit. I think he's also been in a terrible situation in Columbus for a number of years here, but like I said, he fared quite well there in Columbus last year. Like to be the 12th best goaltender, or at least like top 15, if we want to widen that, while spending most of your year in Columbus on a team who, what did they finish? Like second last, third last, something like that. It's like, that's very impressive to me. And now he's going to come into a much better situation. So he doesn't have to be the guy, like I said. But yeah, I'm much more confident this year than I was last year. Last year, it felt like a total crapshoot. Like you're hoping Forsberg can replicate and be that guy again that he was the first year. And you're hoping Talbot can just be average, and he wasn't even that. So I think Korpisalo at worst will be average. And like I said, that's what they need.
I think too. I'm really curious, and we'll get into this throughout the summer and throughout the last month here, leading into training camp. But I'm really curious to see the way DJ Smith is going to coach this team, because he said on record with Ian Mendez at the draft in an interview, he said I got to coach them differently, the players, and to me that says I need to hold them accountable for making defensive mistakes. And I personally I'm pointing right at Drake Batherson and Brady Tkachuk, because look, I mean, Kachuk to a lesser extent because he's the captain and he was unreal offensively, all that. Batherson had a very up and down year, career year, 62 points, great on the power play, had 8 even strength goals, I believe. Like he was not good at even strength, production wise and also defensively. So to me, I think that's going to be holding them accountable. And then also the defense, because you've got a lot of studs back there now. I'm curious to see how he's going to hold them accountable and how that's going to. I'd expect this to be a better defensive team next season. I don't think that's a hot take. I think that they should be expected to. They might not score as many goals, and that might be the case. I know they're going to score a lot, but I'm curious, right? With guys like Norris and Stutzla and Kachuk, Batherson, how do they hold them accountable defensively? Because last year, team defense was the issue for me. It wasn't like a lot of goals against. Yeah, you could point to Travis Hamonic, or you could point to Nick Holden making a mistake, or Shabbat making a mistake. But to me, a lot of their issues were transition defense last year. And stay tuned. Obviously, on this, I don't think this is like a spoiler. We've kind of alluded to it, but throughout the year, we're gonna do video breakdown stuff. I'd been doing it on Twitter a little bit during last season, and we're gonna try and do that for our YouTube page as well. So obviously, we're gonna break down some stuff with the Sens. So personally, I had an eye for that last year, just their back checking. I remember a game in Calgary. It was during that stretch where they just lost their playoff hopes in March. It was a 5-on, like they were on a power play and they gave up a shorthanded goal, but they gave up the shorthanded goal to the defenseman who jumped in the rush. Like it was a 2-on-3, and the defenseman joined in the rush, and they didn't have a back checker. Like it was that to me was just like, what are we doing here? So I need that to change. And I think this, to link it back to goaltending, I think that will help the goaltending in the long run. So I think, like you said, Korpisalo playing that well on a Columbus team that was actively trying to lose. Not that the players were, but it means something. Like this wasn't a team that was supposed to do well that ended up not doing well. This was we're going for Connor Bedard kind of tank, and he was the anti Connor Bedard. Like he's the reason they didn't get him when you think about it. So I'm very confident in Korpisalo. Forsberg, I am confident in too if he's healthy. But that's gonna be one just to watch in camp. Like I want to see how he looks and everything like that. But I'm feeling pretty good about it. Better than I thought I would coming into this year. I didn't think they would go after Korpisalo, to be honest.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I'm excited that they did, and that they went out and got their goalie. I know they gave Korpisalo a pretty hefty contract, and that's one of the concerning aspects to him as a player. But I'm okay with it. Like they got their goalie, and hopefully he will be good enough, basically. I really agree with your point about team defense. So I think the nice thing is that Batherson came out and he said on one of the podcasts he went on this summer, like he recognized it. He said like he just wasn't good enough defensively. His minus 35 or whatever it was among the league worst. Like he recognized it, though. He owned it. So he straight up said like, I have to be better. I'm going to really focus on doing that. And we also heard Brady say, we've talked about this a few times, after that 5-0 Chicago loss, he said like, we were cheating. We cheated the game and that's why we lost. And that's when things really started to go off the rails because they didn't fix it. So that's where I'm going to watch DJ Smith this year, because like if you lose 5-0 to the worst team in hockey in a pivotal game where you could really like cement yourself, and you are able to come out and say after that you were terrible and that you were cheating the game and you guys were just trying to score, like you can't just let that happen again. I mean, I'm sorry, but if that just keeps happening over and over and you lose your season there, it's not acceptable. Like at this point, it's pretty much like if something like that happens, DJ's got to be, all but out the door. Like that's kind of my perspective on it, especially if we're talking November and some streak like that happens, I'm immediately gonna just jump to, yeah, sorry DJ, but whether it's your fault or not, like somebody's got to bite the bullet here because I mean the team has to be there, right? The expectations have to be there. But yeah, I love to hear the young players kind of say that they are accountable, and that they know they're cheating the game a little bit. Batherson knows. Again, he was getting better on his ankle too. That's why I'm excited to see him. And again, the World Junior investigation thing is still pending, and we're expected to hear the names. We don't know if he's involved in that or not, but assuming he plays, I'm very excited to see him because I think the ankle was still bugging him a lot this past year based on what he said, and that's going to really help him kind of, stay consistently in the play and not be cheating, because obviously if you're being bugged by an ankle injury, you're going to be cheating a little bit to try and produce. I think now he can kind of focus on his two-way game. So hopefully that's the case. I think too, like we said, the depth is going to help team defense a lot because now having Shane Pinto on the third line and kind of, you've got Kubalik and Tarasenko instead of just DeBrincat. By the way, DeBrincat was pretty bad defensively last year too. That was kind of an underrated talking point, but you've got those two guys, so now you're top nine. Like you can roll your third line out, and it's not going to be, these guys who really are just kind of there and filling out the lineup like the Dylan Gambrells of the world. You're actually going to have a Shane Pinto who's reliable both ends of the ice and will produce, but also help you defensively. So I think the team defense is a lot better. People also forget we added Jacob Chikrin, right? That he played 12 games. Like that doesn't even count for anything last year. I think overall the roster looks a lot better defensively. We won't have Nikita Zaitsev in the lineup, and then Korpisalo will come in and hopefully just be that kind of consistent force in the net. And again, Forsberg, praying he can at least return to somewhat of form and that we're not going to be stuck with like a terrible backup here because of his injuries. But I think he'll be fine, honestly. I think he'll be at least, like I said, average. And the team defense is going to be way, way better. So I'm excited to see that. And yeah, I'm very confident despite only staying a 7 because of health.
Yes, seven's a safe answer. That's a good one. Yeah, but bringing up that Chicago game, yeah, that it stings just thinking about that March stretch, and it's crazy though because they were right there, and we believe, both of us do, and I think a lot of other Sens fans believe this team on paper is better than they were on paper last year. And it might sound crazy, yeah, they lost Alex DeBrincat, who is a former 40 goal scorer, but hey, they went out and got another former 40 goal scorer, and then they added Dominic Kubalik, who is also a 20 goal scorer. So they supplemented DeBrincat well, I think. It's almost the reverse of two birds with one stone. It kind of feels like, one bird with two stones kind of thing. I don't really know how to word that, but they adequately replaced the on paper or the lineup on paper so far. And yeah, I think all of this, again, it comes down to goaltending because a goalie can make or break your season. We've seen it with a lot of teams, and I'm going to do it. And I know we're going to talk about the Sabres here in a bit. But the New Jersey Devils, because we have, time and time again, all of last year, just compared the two teams because very similar timelines for the rebuild. But I think it's pretty obvious New Jersey is obviously just 1 year, one step ahead of Ottawa. So this year for the Sens should be what New Jersey did last year. And that should not be crazy to expect just based on, you draft Nico Hischier in 2017. He's your now captain. Draft Brady Tkachuk in 2018. He's your captain. Get your superstar in 2019 in Jack Hughes. Get your superstar in 2020 in Tim Stützle. Like it's literally a year behind, and now we're here. So this should be the year. And coincidentally, the year before, like last summer, 2022, the Devils go out, get some pieces for the blue line. They supplement the blue line. They go get a goalie. They get Vitek Vanacek from the Capitals, or maybe they signed him in free agency. I'm not sure, but they supplemented their goaltending, and it helped. It helped. It helped. It helped. So they don't need to be the star. That's the thing with the Ottawa goaltending. We don't need a goalie to carry them. Just stop the puck. Just stop the puck, make the saves you're supposed to make, and the team should take care of the rest. I think that's going to be the message, which is why I'm confident in Korpisalo. If he could do it in LA, he can do it here. That's why I'm pretty confident in that. So do you have anything else for the confidence in Ottawa's goaltenders?
No, I think that's good. I mean, like my main point is just what you said, that they just don't need to be the star. Like I think people kind of look at it and they think that the goalies have to carry the team to victory every night, and that's just not the case. The team should be good enough at this point to carry themselves, and just like the problem with the goalies Ottawa's had, and we can go back, like we had Talbot obviously, but then you look at Marcus Hogberg, you look at like they had Nielsen for a while and he was all right, but just the turnover in net and everything. Like the one thing with all those goalies that was consistent, and obviously the team wasn't very good either, but they always let in bad goals. Like they let in bad timing. How do you say it? They let in goals at the bad times. You know what I mean?
Untimely
Yes,
goals, yeah.
exactly. Yeah. So that's kind of like what breaks your back when you're playing is, you're because there's a lot of games even with Talbot where Ottawa looked really good. They looked like they were dominating. They had control of the flow, like that they were just kind of dominating the game, and they just couldn't score. And then a terrible goal would go in on Talbot, and it's like at the worst time, right before the period ends or something, and then everything falls apart. And that just like, of course, it's gonna happen sometimes, but that shouldn't happen on a regular basis. And it really has over the entire rebuild. Like they just haven't been able to rely on their goalies other than Forsberg 2 years ago now, where to not allow untimely goals. You know what I mean? Like they constantly just let in these bad goals at the worst times, and it broke the entire game down. So for me, Corpusalo, just don't do that. Just be consistent. It's all about consistency. Ian Mendez, when he came on, spoke about it too. About you're gonna get like 15 bad games out of your goaltenders a year. That's expected, but like overall, you can't have half the games being bad games from your goalies, and you come out after and you say, well, you don't want to blame the goalie, but like we all kind of know that he let in some bad goals tonight, right? You can't have that every second game. So Corpusalo and Forsberg just have to be good enough is like my motto. We're not even striving for elite here. We're striving for just be good enough to allow the team to win without costing them games is kind of what I'm thinking on it.
What's interesting, and it might be far-fetched, it might be stretching here, but this tandem has done it together before in Lake Erie, the Monsters, and I'm 99% sure that's an AHL team. So they won a Calder Cup together. I don't know who. I'm guessing Corpusalo was the starter there, but it doesn't matter. They were a tandem and they did it before. They've done it. They've had success together. So that's kind of rare, I think. I think to have a reuniting tandem right in the league, and that's important too because I'm not saying that Talbot and Forsberg or Murray and Forsberg had bad chemistry and didn't like each other, but if you know your partner and you can push each other to be better, I think that's huge. And it was probably hard for Talbot and Forsberg to do that because they weren't healthy at the same time ever, really. And just one more thing on Talbot too, and it kind of links in with DeBrincat. I feel like in all of last year, I want to say 3 games. There were 3 games, and they were all around Christmas where Talbot was like Forsberg was hurt, so Talbot took all the games. And in those 3 games around Christmas, DeBrincat and Talbot were the 2 best players on the team by a mile. Like, I don't know if you remember, but that game against Boston around Christmas where it went to a shootout, Cam Talbot stole the show. I was at that game actually. Like he stole the show, and then I think the one in Washington, DeBrincat gets the tying goal and then the overtime winner. Those games, and then also another one against Washington at home. I think it was during a big snowstorm or something, but like that game too, DeBrincat scores, Cam Talbot stands on his head, and they lose in overtime. Like it was a 1 or a 2-0-1 stretch, but those 2 games or those 3 games, sorry, were the only time all season that they were studs. For a somewhat extended period of time. So it's interesting, right? Like the offseason acquisitions last year that didn't work out and aren't here anymore had a little stretch. So we just need Korpisalo and Tarasenko and Kubalik to be consistent throughout the season. Like I don't need Tarasenko to go on a hot streak and score 5 goals in 5 games and then go cold for like 10, 20 games, right? And that was the book on DeBrincat. It's like when he gets hot, he gets hot. And we kind of saw it, but like it just never came together. Like he got hot with assists. I remember he had like 12 assists in 3 games or something, again over Christmas. The guy just loves Christmas, I guess. But that's kind of what I'm looking for. It's just consistency. Like I think the Sens and maybe even the players too were waiting for DeBrincat to break out and waiting for Talbot to take the reins, be that veteran goalie who's been there before, be the all-star he was the year before. And it just never happened. So I think moderating expectations for them and not putting too high of a standard on all the new guys is important as fans too. Like we don't need to again be expecting Tarasenko to come and light up the lamp and exactly replace DeBrincat's play because they're different players. So we just have to expect the put the bar low because that's that, and then you'll be surprised. I guess that's kind of what I'm going at there. So we'll move on from goaltenders. We will again probably bring them up when we do this comparison, but let's talk about another team in the Atlantic Division, one that the Sens have been, I don't know, kind of linked to all summer, and kind of because last year they were tight in the playoff standings. Obviously, the Buffalo Sabres finished 1 point out of the playoffs, and the Ottawa finished 6. So on paper, again, Buffalo was obviously way closer to the playoffs. They were right there. I think they won their last 2 games of the year, but they were out before or something like that. But still, at the end of the day, they were 1 point out. They were right there. Easily could have been a playoff team this year. But I think it's fair to say that in the league circles, let's say in other fan bases and in mock playoff, standings for next year, Buffalo is getting more respect than the Sens. I don't think that's crazy to say. So on the Everyday Sens podcast, we are going to compare both rosters as they stand right now. Buffalo hasn't really made a huge swing in free agency the last couple of years. Ottawa's obviously added and lost some big names in that time, but let's do it, Brennan. Let's just break down the core players, the depth players, each position. Let's do it. Buffalo Sabres versus the Ottawa Senators. This should be a fun one.
Yeah, for sure. And I just want to preface this too by saying that I actually do like Buffalo's their pipeline, I guess you could say. They've drafted extremely well. Like they've got some really nice prospects in the system. Still one of the best pools, which is completely ridiculous. But the respect thing is certainly interesting because they definitely have gotten more respect. And yes, they were closer to the playoffs this year. That's fine. But at the same time, I think that they are on a very similar timeline to Ottawa. And I don't know. When I look at the lineups, I certainly don't think one is like vastly better than the other, but I think they're close, but I just don't see how people are looking at it and saying like Buffalo's so much further ahead. I don't know. They're very similar to me. So yeah, I don't know if we can just do this like kind of position by position. I'm gonna pull up the whole depth chart. Like for the Sabres, you might as well, right? So we've got this, of course, people not on YouTube won't be able to see it, but it's on Cap Friendly and it's just got like each line basically pulled right up. So if you look at we all know Ottawa's lineup pretty much or fairly well, right? So I guess like if you look at the kind of the first line here and most of their core forwards, you've got Tage Thompson as center and then Jeff Skinner and Alex Tuck, right? And so I think Tage Thompson is pretty much equal to Tim Stützle. First of all, we should note that they're very similar players. Thompson had 47 goals and 94 points this past year. Timmy had 39 goals and 90 points, and he's like 4 years younger. I think that they're pretty much like they cancel out as first line centers. And then you've got Skinner and Tuck. So, I mean, if you look at the point totals, this is the nice thing about what we've got pulled up. As you can see on the right side there, the point totals and everything, they're very similar to what Ottawa had on the first line, right? With that Stützle, Giroux, and Tkachuk. We don't know if they're going to roll that same trio again, but regardless, like you look at those three players and they're very similar to what you're seeing there in Buffalo. Like I think Tkachuk even had one more point than Skinner and like the same amount of goals. It's just very, very similar up front. So that whole first line kind of cancels out with me with Claude Giroux. I think Giroux even had 79 points just like Alex Tuck did. That's kind of crazy how similar they actually are now that I'm looking at it. But yeah, do you think that first line kind of cancels out with Ottawa's as well?
Yeah. I mean, I like to think of it as what let's think about a 1-for-1 trade kind of thing, right? I mean, I know the point totals were close, but personally, if I'm being totally unbiased, I think based on last season, Tage Thompson had a better year. Like 40, you can't look
Oh, for
past
sure.
47
Yeah, he's
goals.
just so much older too.
That's the thing. Like I think it's reasonable to expect that was his best year. And look, it could be the same for Stützle. He might never hit 90 points again. That's fine too. Like, but he's a 90-point player. So I think it is close, but if you have to give the edge one way or another, I'm gonna say Thompson gets the edge there. But again, it's not that, it's close. Closer than Sabres fans would let you believe. I'll put it that way. Skinner and Tkachuk. What's interesting though is because if you would do, if you propose a 1-for-1 Tkachuk for Skinner trade, Sens are laughing on the phone, and I think Buffalo does that because contract and yeah, Skinner performed to his cap hit this year, but it's a big cap hit. It's by far the most expensive contract on either team, and he's older. And I mean, I would still take Brady Tkachuk because he's the captain of the team and everything like that. So I think, personally for me, I take Tkachuk over Skinner, but I take Thompson over Stützle. And then I think Tuck, I would probably take Tuck over Giroux just because of age. And again, though, I think it's pretty much a wash. Like you're right. I think top line wise, I'm guessing these guys all played together. Is that how they have it ranked, or is it ranked by points? Yeah, no, okay,
No,
they
it's
all
it's
played together.
actually their lines. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Yeah. So I think it's personally I think that's closer than I thought it was, to be honest. I hadn't looked at the point totals. I just knew that they had a really good year over there. Keep in mind too, the Sabres, I believe, were the highest scoring team in the league uh last year. I know they had 5 20-goal scorers, and the Sens had 6. So and those were the top two, I believe, and maybe the Oilers had 5 as well, but the Sens had the most 20-goal scorers in the league last year. I think Buffalo had the most goals overall as a team. So their depth was a little bit stronger than Ottawa's last year. But yeah, as we get into the second line here, it's going to be interesting because that's obviously we get some unknowns for Ottawa because we haven't seen them, which is why I mentioned, that the Sabres hadn't really made a ton of changes over the summer, except a couple depth signings for their blue line, but nothing super crazy, no.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, the first lines I think are pretty comparable. It is hard too if we're talking about it just as a comparison because we're kind of comparing for next year. So in regards to age, it's like it's kind of irrelevant if we're only looking at next year, but at the same time, like Timmy to me could very well jump to, a 100-point player this year. I mean, look at the Sens lineup, right? But either way, yeah, I think the first lines are very similar. On the second line, we've got Casey Middlestad, Dylan Cousins, and Victor Olofsson. So I don't know. I mean, looking at this in Middlestad, they actually had a much better year than I thought they did. Some of these players, I thought he was kind of busting out. Like he was an eighth overall pick, and I thought he was kind of just being irrelevant. But he did produce 59 points. Um, Looking at Ottawa's, I mean, I've got theirs pulled up too. Cap Friendly has it as Giroux, Norris, and Batherson, but I think you could kind of, for the sake of this, look at it as like Norris, Batherson, Tarasenko, or whatever you want to look at, right? Kubalik. Um, what do you think we should do for that? Should it just be like Norris, Tarasenko, and Batherson basically is kind of the general comparison? They'll shuffle them in camp and stuff, but that's kind of what we're going off of right now. So if you compare like Norris, Batherson, Tarasenko to Middlestad, Cousins, and Olofsson, personally, I feel very biased, but I like Ottawa's group a lot. I don't like. I'm not going to pretend to be a Buffalo Sabres scout here. I don't know exactly how Casey Middlestad is, like where his development is at, but do you have a better kind of take on those three players? You might have better than me.
Um, maybe not Dylan Cousins though. I'm a big fan of Dylan Cousins. And I'll admit as well, did not know he had 30 goals and 68 points last year. That's pretty good. So, he outscored DeBrincat and in both ways. Like he had more points and more goals. And look, points is not everything, obviously, and that's why again, like saying Kachuk had one more point than Skinner, I think that just should like solidify it that he's the better player because you want Kachuk, the intangibles and all that. But anyway, um, I mean, in that group, I think I would. It comes down to do you want Dylan Cousins or Josh Norris as your second line center, and like to me, I still think that Dylan Cousins has the potential to take over Tage Thompson as their number one guy. And they're in a similar boat where they kind of have two number one centers playing in their top two lines. And I think the Sens do too, because Norris at his peak and what he's shown us is a first line center, right? He can take those matchups and he can produce 35 goals in 60 games. Norris is probably the biggest if for the Sens this year. Like it's if he can stay healthy, but also if he can produce like he did, because let's not forget he did it for 1 year. He had that production year in one season. So I'm not doubting the guy. I'm obviously big Josh Norris guy, but right now I think I'm taking Dylan Cousins over Josh Norris. So again, I'm not really helping the Sens case here, but we'll get to it. Don't worry. But yeah, in terms of Middlestat, like I'm taking Tarasenko over Casey
That's what I
Middlestat.
was gonna say. Was I think Ottawa's
Yeah,
got Tarasenko, and if we say Batherson, I think you're taking both of them easily over Middlestat and
exactly.
Olofsson.
Yeah,
So
it's just Cousins for me, and I mean it's not even the numbers. Like if he had 40 points this year, I would think the same. Like he's big. He's just he's a a rat to play against. Like I think him and Stoessel went at it a little bit in their games last year. Like it's going to be a fun rivalry, let's say, between the two of them because I know that they went at it too in the World Juniors a couple times. Like they just don't like each other, Stoessel and Cousins. So that's the one I'm going to look at for that's the matchup, I think, anyway. So I'm a big fan of Dylan Cousins. I think he's a great player. So I'm taking Cousins over Norris, but I'm taking Tarasenko and Batherson over the wingers on that second line for the depth chart.
yeah, and the interesting thing is like we're trying to kind of compare lines, yes, but more so like tiers of players, sort of, if that makes sense. Like Giroux, I would think they might split up that top line of Kachuk, Stützle, and Giroux, and put like the second line of Norris, Giroux, and Batherson, and then have Tarasenko on the first line. But just because of this kind of tier list, it makes more sense to compare them this way, where they're in the same sort of tier. Um, but yeah, for me, it's the same thing. I think you're definitely taking Tarasenko over Middlestad. You're taking Batherson over Olofsson because again, Olofsson, he scored 28 goals, but he's a 40-point player. Like he just literally scores one-timers and that's it. So I'm definitely taking Batherson over him. I would also take Cousins over Norris. I think we don't have to factor health in, but like that is kind of a factor too. Like if we were taking one or the other to kind of build your franchise around right now, I would take Cousins just because I'm pretty scared about Norris's health. And also the fact that, yeah, he only had that 1 year of 35 goals. We don't really know. We don't really know what he's going to do, to be honest with you. He's kind of a wild card. So I do think Ottawa has the edge on that second line for sure, based on tiers of players. And this kind of speaks to their depth too, which is our next point. And looking at the depth, I have to say I'm quite excited about Ottawa's depth compared to this. Now, Buffalo doesn't have bad depth, but like if we look at the third line here, we've got Jordan Greenway, Peyton Krebs, and John Jason Peterka. Of course, Peterka is a sore spot for us because Ottawa passed on him, but that's okay. We don't need to get into that. I miss the opportunity to have JJ with Timmy. They are best friends. But anyways, if you look at this, I mean, we go to Ottawa's, right, and they've now got, it's kind of shuffle, but they've now got Kubalik, Pinto, and Joseph is listed on the depth chart. I think he's kind of a wild card. We could probably slot Greg in instead, I'd say. So Ridley Gregg, Shane Pinto, and Dominic Kubalik as Ottawa's third line. I have to say I'm taking all three of those players, I think, over what we're seeing here in Buffalo. Like that's a wipe for me. We've got Greenway, Krebs, and Peterka. Again, Krebs and Peterka, I think they have high potential, and Greg is also young, but like they're young, right? I mean, they're unproven. You don't really know how they're going to slot in. Krebs had 9 goals and 26 points in 74 games last year. Peterka had a good year with 12 goals, 32 points in 77 games. I just, like, if you look at it, I mean, I'm taking Pinto over Krebs 100% right now. I'm taking Kubalik over Peterka 100% right now. And then Greenway is kind of just like there. Like Greenway's big, he's physical, but he's not a producer at all. He had 11 points in 62 games. I watched him a lot in Minnesota back in the day, and I like Greenway, but like I'm gonna take Ridley Gregg, I think. I mean, you could say Gregg's not definitely an NHL player, but I think he's ready. Based on what we saw last year, he's gonna be a more dynamic player than Greenway. So for me, it's a clean slate, but what do you think on the third lines?
Yeah, so I'm looking at Buffalo's fourth line as well, and it's interesting because maybe this is just the depth chart. I don't know how often this was rolled, but if you look at the ice time too, that third and fourth line pretty equal in ice time. So I'd imagine going into next year and actually what they did last year too is treat both of these like a third line ice time wise and just kind of split it instead of having a fourth line that plays just around 10 minutes a night. Because all these guys are, or I think the lowest there, if I'm seeing that right, is just under 12 maybe, or just under 13 minutes per game, right? So I think I'll rank it like this. Like I agree with you. I'm taking Ottawa's third line on paper right now over this one. I think Pinto's better than Peyton Krebs. I think Kubalik is better than Peterka, and I think Ridley Gregg will be better than Greenway. You can flip it the other way if you want with the wingers. I don't really care. The thing for me though is that no, I don't. I mean, maybe Peterka, but Krebs isn't going to jump Cousins or Thompson, right? So Krebs and Pinto are both going to be locked into those third line roles, which is good because I do still think Peyton Krebs is a good player. With Peterka, he seems like the only guy on that third line who could jump up. And we talked a lot about Ottawa being able to mix up their top 9. I think Peterka is the only one who you could logistically put on your first line and expect success because I do like him. I'm not seeing Jack Quinn on this list, so he's also in there probably. I'd probably put him on that third line and maybe even bump Greenway down. That might change things a little bit. I don't know why he's not on that list, to be honest. That's kind of weird. So Jack Quinn, I know he had a pretty good year too. I don't know why he just popped in my head there. Yeah, but he'd be on the third line. So actually that kind of changes things for me. I think I would take Quinn over Ridley Gregg right now, obviously. So I may be there, but my point I'm trying to make though is that whatever their fourth line ends up being will be better than Ottawa's fourth line, I think, and that's fair until Ottawa's fourth line proves that they can be effective. So I'd rank it like Ottawa's third line on top, Buffalo 3 and 4, and then Ottawa's fourth line kind of thing. Like if we're talking tiers, right? So versatility wise, maybe Buffalo's is better, but matchup wise, all of that, like on home ice, if you've got Ottawa's third line, like you're pretty confident in them going up against Thompson, Tuck, and Skinner is what I kind of mean there for the top guys.
Yeah, so I guess I forgot about Quinn. I guess he did play the full year in Buffalo last year, which I was not aware of, but I guess that does change it. So it'd probably be Jack Quinn, Peyton Krebs, JJ Peterka. That's a pretty young third line.
That's a pretty good third line, actually.
It is very good, yeah. So that I mean, I'm still taking Ottawa in the sense of Pinto and Kubalik, but I would probably take Quinn over Greg, obviously, right now, just because he's he's a step ahead of him where he is right now in his development. So I totally agree with you though. Looking at the fourth line, that's where Ottawa is kind of in a question mark here because Ottawa's fourth line currently projects as Parker Kelly, Mark Kastelik and Zach McEwen. If Joseph is gone, which we're assuming he is. So that's not a good fourth line. That's just going to be kind of the same boat of you're playing those guys like 8 minutes a night and you're hoping that they don't screw you basically. I'm hoping they can get Crookshank or a prospect in there who's a little more impactful than like a Parker Kelly. Just because like we had Kelly in a full-time role and I mean he didn't produce at all through his hits. He took a lot of penalties though. Like I don't know. At this point, I'm kind of hoping for more impactful players. If you're looking at Buffalo, they've got it would be Greenway, Jost, and Okposo on the fourth line, which is a pretty nice fourth line. I mean, like you said, that's kind of a nice balanced bottom six they have where they can throw their fourth line out and rely on them to play against good like top six lines. Right, they're not going to be a liability. I like Buffalo's fourth line way more than Ottawa's fourth line. That's for sure. Like you said, I think that versatility kind of gives them an edge with their whole bottom six, but at the same time, I do think Ottawa having Shane Pinto and Kubalik on their third line is pretty nice. Like that's also a very good third line, despite Jack Quinn being there for Buffalo. So overall, I totally agree with your point. I'd probably take Ottawa's third line, then Buffalo's bottom six, and then Ottawa's fourth line last out of that whole list. But again, like if we go through the whole forward group, like it's fairly balanced, right? I mean, we pretty much said that their first lines cancel out, like Skinner, Thompson, and Tuck kind of cancels out with Kachuk, Stutzla, and Giroux. That's fairly equal. Maybe Buffalo has a slight edge, but it's pretty equal right now. The second line's Middlestad, Cousins, and Olofsson. Kind of, we said we'd take Ottawa with Tarasenko, Norris, and Batherson. We'd take 2 out of 3 for Ottawa there. And then Quinn, Krebs, Peterka. This is like a lot of names to remember, eh? But yeah, we would go with Greg, Pinto, and Kubalik. We would take that third line over the Quinn, Krebs, and Peterka. However, Quinn being there kind of throws a wrench into the mix because it's not on the depth chart, so that kind of twisted us. But then the fourth lines of Jurgensen's, Jost, and Okposo, which is actually Greenway, Jost, and Okposo, we would definitely take over Ottawa's of Kelly, Kastelik, and McEwen if no prospects come up. So overall, I think it's pretty balanced. However, Buffalo might have a slight edge. It's tough, though, because Ottawa, again, they're going to have, and Buffalo will too, but Ottawa's top guys are going to have that next step of development too. Like Kachuk just scored 35 goals and 83 points, but he's only entering his prime here. He's 23 right now, Brady Kachuk. Like he's still like Skinner's 31. Kachuk is gonna have another step forward. Like that can be expected. So I think Ottawa kind of has the edge with development wise. I think they should be expected to take another step, but overall the groups are fairly similar. Do you have any other thoughts on the forward groups or what do you think?
Yeah, no, that's, I mean, yeah, you did mention age and how if it's for just next year, that shouldn't really matter, but it can because, Tuck, Skinner, even Thompson to a degree, like they are in their prime right now. And it can be fair to say that that was probably their peak season. And maybe it wasn't, but I think history would suggest, like, Alex Tuck, he's 27 going into 28. Like, I don't know if he'll hit 79 points again. And look, again, it's not all about points, but Kachuk can take a step. And based on his brother, who he has followed actually pretty closely, next year for him to follow him, Brady has to get 100 points. Not that I'm expecting him to, but I would not be surprised because he started hot last year, team got cold, and he kind of fell off production-wise, and then he picked it back up again. Like, it's in the cards, and it's not out of the possibility that he could. So if that happens, it's obviously Kachuk clears. But yeah, I think that top line, it kind of washes out. You're right. The forwards are closer than I thought originally. I'm not going to lie. Looking at this and throwing in Quinn on that third line, I think, honestly, even now that I'm looking at that ice time, I feel like Olofsson played on the third line more often based on his line, and Quinn was probably on that second line. I don't really know, but look, Olofsson, I think, was a power play merchant as well because it looks like he was a minus 23, or is that a plus?
No, it's a minus. Yeah, no, he scored a lot on the power play.
Yeah, so like he's, I mean, you can compare him to Batherson maybe in that sense. I don't know, but anyway, this is where it gets fun. I think the defense is kind of the hot topic of discussion because obviously it starts with the Owen Power and Jake Sanderson debate. This is where I think it's the most fun. I think even before we go into goaltending, Ottawa's goaltending is better. I don't think any Sabres fan can debate that. I like Devin Levi a lot, but he's got to prove it. Like, he's a rookie goalie. If they go in starting with him, that's a big, ask for a team that is expecting to make the playoffs next year. So I'm taking Ottawa's goaltending in a heartbeat over that. I think I saw some Sabres fans, using Craig Anderson as a debate, and I don't know if they were there in the last game of the year or they watched, but he retired, so he's not playing any more hockey. for the Buffalo Sabres. So Devin Levi appears to be the guy they're going with. I don't know if they're going to make a trade or anything like that, but goaltending, Ottawa clears. We just kind of talked about how confident we are in Ottawa's goaltenders, and it was pretty confident. But in terms of comparing them to the Buffalo Sabres, the Sens have the better goaltending, and that's not even up for debate. Defense is up for debate, I think, and that's, I love the Sens decor. Buffalo's got quite the decor as well. So let's talk about it. You go ahead first, and then I'll jump in here.
Yeah, well, I'm just gonna first agree with you that like goaltending is a pretty important aspect to this discussion because I mean I love Devin Levi. He looked great at the World Juniors, but at the same time, he's 21 years old, and that doesn't typically go over very well for goaltenders. And it does seem like they're gonna rely on him heavily this year. So I think that is Buffalo's biggest question mark is goaltending because if Levi struggles at all, like Eric Comrie is not gonna be the guy to carry you if he goes down. So we can get into the defense though. First off, like we got obviously Rasmus Dahlin and Matthias Samuelsson is Buffalo's first pair. Ottawa's is expected to be Thomas Chabot and Jacob Chikrin. So this is kind of like the big powerhouse kind of discussion because Dahlin, I'd say, is the best defenseman out of those players I just listed. He's a Norris level type of guy right now, and he's only 23 years old. Like he is a very underrated player in my opinion, Dahlin, who deserves his respect. So I will give it to him. I think he's the best player. However, I think I would take Chabot and Chikrin over Matthias Samuelsson, which means that it's 2-1 for Ottawa. That's not really necessarily a fair way to kind of pick each side, but I don't know. I mean, Samuelsson, obviously he's a defensive defenseman. Like we don't want to look too much at points for this, but 2 goals, 10 points in 55 games. I think he's kind of like an Artem Zub, right? Where he's playing on the first pairing. He's a compliment to Dahlin, but he's a really defensive guy. Ottawa kind of has two powerhouse defensemen in Chabot and Chikrin who are dynamic players who both produce high levels of points. And we don't know how they're going to play with each other yet, but on paper, it looks really nice. Like it looks like they're going to be very productive and be playing like a ridiculous amount of minutes per game. So for me, I think Dahlin's the best player of those four. However, I think Ottawa's balance of having two high-end, arguably number one defenseman is kind of like, how do you pass on that? You know what I mean? Like, yeah.
Yeah, well, okay, so it's almost, to me, I compare Samuelsson with Zub. I think Zub and Samuelsson are tight. It's hard. It's easier with the forward lines to compare, but I think with defense, teams mix around their top four. The Sens are probably going to do it too at some point. Like it's harder to compare in that sense. But you're right. Yeah, I think of all the players on this list, Dahlin is the only one that's clear of anyone. Like I think he's just the stud. I think he's probably their. I mean, most Sabres fans would tell you he's their best player, even better than Thompson and stuff. So that's an edge, and you can't really knock that. This is where it gets fun though, right? Because it's like the tiers I was talking about. You got Dahlin at the top, and then right in the middle, I'd throw Chabot, Chikrin, Power, Sanderson, and then it's the rest. So to me, I would caution against taking Buffalo's top pair just because like it's hard to say. Oh, we haven't seen Chabot and Chikrin work, but I mean we haven't. So it would be. I think we got to talk. I think we have to do the top four. I think doing the top four is easier than just doing a pair because obviously, if the Sabres wanted to stack their top pair, they would do Power and Dahlin. Like, you know what I mean? And I think the Sens are kind of doing that with Chabot, Chikrin, and then going Sanderson, Zub. So I think personally, I would take Ottawa's top four over them just because I think Yogi Haru, I believe that's how you pronounce his name there too. To me feels a bit like a Brandstrom. Like I know he's a bit smaller. He's 6 feet. But like Connor Clifton is a good player. So I actually wanted the Sens to go after him. I mean, at the deadline, whatever it was, like I like the player. He's tough and he's 5'11", like moves the puck well. I'm like that bottom pairing to me is kind of interesting because like, do you take Brandstrom and Hamonic over Eric Johnson and Connor Clifton? Like, I think that's a great discussion. Like it's like that's why I'm saying Yogi Hart. Like to me, it feels like the Sabres are one piece away, maybe not even a Jacob Chikrin level player, but they were in on Chikrin at the deadline too. Like they were rumored to be in on him. I feel like Yogi Haru would be a. I don't feel like I know he would be a third pairing guy on the Sens. So I think that's how you have to quantify it because yeah, Dahlin clears every defenseman on the Sens team. No one's debating that. We're all aware he's the stud. I mean, that's what happens when you get a first overall pick again, but kind of a layup. But when you talk about the entire decor. If the Sabres' fourth best defenseman is going to be the Senators' fifth, sixth best, then you have to say that Ottawa's got the better blue line, I think, because Power and Sanderson cancel out to me. I think they're both equal, and Calder voting would not tell you that, but literally every other stat would. I don't think it's up for debate. Any Sabres fan saying Owen Power is way better than Jake Sanderson is out to lunch, quite
Well, and they
frankly.
all
I think they
do.
were, and they all do. That's what's crazy. That's why we're even having this discussion. Like that's why I said I prefaced it with this started with a Power Sanderson comparison all season. But I would say, and it's funny because I still think Sanderson's the best defenseman on the Sens, and that's not to say that because Power is the second best. Like it doesn't really quantify. I think that Shabbat, Chikrin, and Sanderson are all in the same group, and that would be Power too. But the Sens have three of those guys, and the Sabres have one, and then they have Dahlin. So maybe that cancels out, but it's 3-2 essentially, right, with those top guys.
It is, yeah. And again, I was talking about how Ottawa, they just have a ton of star power now on defense. Like, that's the thing. And then people underrate Brandstrom too on the bottom pairing. But yeah, so you've got Dahlin at one, like you said. And then, like, again, we're all agreeing here. If the Sabres fans are watching this, I can already see them in the comments. Oh, no, Power is way ahead of Sanderson. He should be in the next tier up. No, stop that. You've got Dahlin at one. That's fine. I'll agree with you there. Then you go to the next tier, and you've got Shabbat, Chikrin, Sanderson, Power, and I guess Samuel. I wouldn't even put Samuelson in
No,
that. No.
but also like to be like not in that order, right? Like I think it's just in a group. You've got
Yeah.
Power, Sanderson, Shabbat, Chikrin. Like I'm not ready to say one is way better than the
No,
other.
no.
Like
I mean,
if
they're all like
like
equal.
they're the
Yeah.
tier two of these two
Yeah.
teams. I think that's completely fair. Yeah.
Yeah. And then the next tier, you would have like your Zub, your Samuelson, and then you'd go maybe your Brandstrom, and then you'd go into the rest of them there. But like you said, I mean, if you look at the top four, Yokiharu. Oh my God, that's a weird name to say. Yokiharu. Yeah, he's kind of the worst one out of the whole group of eight. If I was to pick, I mean, I'd take Zub over him. If we're looking at like Ottawa versus Buffalo here. And like you said, I think he'd be a third pairing guy on Ottawa just because, again, Ottawa's top four is really nice. I don't know why people are underrating this. It's a very, very good top four. And Sanderson and Power, yeah, they call it or nonsense, whatever. They're equal to me as well. I don't think that's really even much of a discussion at this point. I think they're very close to each other. Maybe Power had the edge this year, but I think they're going to be pretty on the same wavelength there going forward. The bottom pairing, yeah, Johnson is kind of a liability. I'm not big on Eric Johnson at this point in his career. But again, so is Hamonic a little bit. So they're pretty equal bottom pairings, I'd say. Brandstrom, I would give the edge over Clifton. However, Clifton, I mean, he's a little more proven. And if we're talking next year, maybe he has a better year overall. But regardless, I think for the defense, I'm probably taking Ottawa, like just straight up, just because I think that top four is so freaking good. I think people are going to see it this year too. I think however you shuffle it, it looks like an excellent top four. Shabbat and Chikrin together should be monstrous if they can stay healthy. Again, health is permitting to all of this conversation. But I would probably take Ottawa's defense and goalies, which to me means I would take Ottawa as a team because I'm taking two of their biggest components, right? However, I don't even think we need to pick, like, would you take Ottawa or Buffalo? That's not really the point necessarily. I think it's more just to compare. I think that regardless of who you want to pick right now, roster wise, the two teams are going to be head and head this whole year. They're going to be neck and neck. They're going to be very, very close to each other for most of the year. And I don't really think that's up for debate either. I don't think one of these teams is going to jump way ahead of the other unless Buffalo's goalies really screw them. I think they're going to be really contending down to the wire at the end of the year for whether it's a playoff position or playoff positioning if both of them get in and they're kind of fighting for, into the top three in the Atlantic or one of them's going to be a wild card. So I think, yeah, that's kind of my point on it is that these teams, regardless of who you like more right now, they're going to be close this year. And I can admit that as well. I don't think either fan base should be saying that they're going to be way ahead of the other, even though we know that one of the fan bases will be saying that. So yeah, that's my point on it. But what else? What other notes do you have on this group here?
That's kind of the only thing though. It's not a this isn't an exercise to be like, oh yeah, the Sens are way better and whatever. Like, yeah, and I said we're gonna go through all the teams in the Atlantic. We will be comparing. Like, it won't be just the Sabres, but I think starting with the Sabres makes sense. It's just kind of timely that with all the Calder stuff with Power and Sanderson. Like, I thought it was just ridiculous. Like if you're a Sabres fan, you cannot tell me that Power was that much better than Sanderson this year. He might have been slightly. He played 4 more games than him. Like he might have been had an overall better year. He played more minutes, whatever it was. It was way, way closer than the voting suggested, than fans would suggest, other teams would suggest. Power's got that, first overall hype to him, right? And rightfully so, because again, we're not detracting from Owen Power. We are saying he is an elite defenseman. If you've heard the way we talk about Jake Sanderson and we're saying they're equal players, you'd think we think Owen Power is a god for the way we talk about Sanderson. So it's not a knock on Owen Power. It's just a respect thing for Jake Sanderson. Now, Dahlin, this is kind of an interesting part though, because Dahlin needs a new contract. He's got 1 year left and he's an RFA. He signed a bridge deal. That guy is going to get paid. So I'm very curious to see what he gets paid. I think Owen Power, I don't know how many years left he's got there. He also needs a new deal. So Power and Sanderson, I guarantee they're going to sign the same contract. I just have a feeling, bridge, long-term, whatever it is, I think Sanderson might actually be waiting for that needle to drop. Like maybe Power signs first, but Sabres fans maybe, and Kevin Adams and Pierre Dorion, like if they're both watching and don't jump the gun. Like these players should be paid the same because they are of equal value. Now, Sanderson kills penalties. Owen Power did not kill penalties as a rookie. That's probably an edge I'd give to Sanderson. But yeah, like it's more just about, and honestly, if there's a Sabres fan watching and getting frustrated, like maybe we're underrating Dahlin. Like I know he's probably a top 10 defenseman in the NHL when he's at his best. So maybe we are underrating him a little bit. And quite honestly, I could see the argument too, where you can say that Dahlin alone makes the Sabres blue line better because he's that level of player, which is fair. But right now, I think with what Chychrun brings to the table and with what Chabot brings to the table, it's not out of the realm of possibility that Chychrun is a guy who could push for a Norris Trophy if he has a full healthy season, or Chabot at his best. Because let's not forget, he was not at his best last year, and he would tell you that. Every Sens fan would say that. So I think overall the blue line is probably a more enticing discussion than the forwards. But as we prove, just for players, for roster players, not goalies not included, because Buffalo hasn't really addressed their goaltending at all, really. Players on the roster, it's a very tight discussion, and it's exciting because they're both teams that need to make the playoffs soon, probably next year. Honestly, they both have to make it, I would say. And I hope that both can, because I wouldn't be shocked if both sneak in here. So yeah, that's all I kind of got on the comparison. I don't know if you have anything else there, but a tale of two different stories, right? In a rebuild, and two teams that are ready to make the jump. I think Detroit is a year behind, or 2 years behind, whatever it is. But it's exciting. It's exciting that Buffalo and Ottawa, because you think back to those rivalries back in the mid 2000s, like the 07 series, like it was some really, really good hockey back then. So I hope we can get back to that.
Yeah, me too. And again, we were young in those days, but yeah, I mean, I'm hoping to watch, like, obviously Buffalo's a rival and we don't want to root for them at all, but I am excited to kind of watch these two teams be on the same contending timeline. You know what I mean? Like there's a few teams in the league where you can look at them and say, yeah, Ottawa's going to be competing with them over the next 10 years to try and win a cup, right? And that's exciting. Like you're hating the other team, but at the same time, it's kind of fun to hope that you can build those rivalries, because if you look at like Toronto and Boston in the playoffs, for example, like those are the passionate kind of playoff rivalries where you look at it and it's like, wow, this is going to be a bloodbath and it's just a ton of fun. So hopefully Ottawa and Buffalo can be in that same kind of boat where they're facing each other for multiple playoff series, and the fans can go at each other and people can go in my replies and send so much hate. But yeah, I mean, it'd be fun though. It'd be fun hate if they're in the playoffs. It'd be fun hate. So that's all I've got too. I think my point was just that we're not trying to say Ottawa's way better than Buffalo or Buffalo's way better than Ottawa. We're saying that they're going to be competing neck and neck, but hopefully this gave you kind of a better, just a better look, because most people don't really spend the time to look at other teams' rosters in depth. Like I don't know, typically you don't go through and look at every other team's fourth line and stuff, so it's kind of cool to be able to compare these. And again, if you weren't on YouTube, you can either go on Cap Friendly and look up Buffalo's depth chart, or you can just throw up the YouTube quick and subscribe while you're at it, and then look at what we've got pulled up, because we've got the whole list here. But yeah, did you have something else to add there, Jay?
Yeah, really quickly, right before we wrap up here, I forgot about Jack Quinn. He was injured in off-season training, so that's why he's not on the list. I think I don't want to say it was his Achilles, but I think it was a bad injury. So long-term stuff. So I like mid-season maybe. I think it was similar to Duclair. I think that was a couple months ago. Yeah. So that sucks. That's why he's not on there. So mean, you got to factor that in. That's that. Like, I mean, he's not going to be on the roster for half the year. Like, you have to factor
It's a
that in.
big
So that's
hit.
why he's not there. It is a big hit because he. I mean, I was gonna say, I was just thinking, oh, we learned stuff, during the during this. So I'm excited to do it for other teams too because yeah, like obviously we're Sens fans. It's not a secret. But I want to dive into other teams and be able to be like, yeah, we I didn't give them respect here, and Jack Quinn was probably part of that. Like if he's there, that's a different looking middle six, but he's not for the time being. So yeah, it's not ideal. So yeah, we like doing that exercise. Definitely gonna do it again. I'm excited that we got to get through all that. Took up a lot of time too. We were, we were thinking about doing two teams, but I think it's tough because there's so many guys to go through. So yeah, that'll do it for episode 29 of the Everyday Sens podcast. Also, though, if you are a Tampa Bay Lightning fan, a Toronto Maple Leafs fan, a Boston Bruins fan, Florida Panthers fan, and you just listen to all that, these two teams are coming, and I think it's going to be this year because the gap is closing. It closed last year, and I think there's gonna be some mix up in the Atlantic Division this season. I'm hoping anyway. So that'll do it for episode 29 of the Everyday Sens podcast. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe to the YouTube page. We are on the road to 1,000 subscribers. I think we're gonna hit it by training camp. We've gotten a lot of positive feedback throughout the last few weeks with interviews and stuff like that. So we really appreciate it. Subscribe to everydaysens.com for in-depth analysis on everything that happens. Articles will be going up more frequently during the season as well. So thank you everyone for tuning in, and we will see you next week.